One of the coldest cases in music history may be finally coming to a dramatic end, now that Las Vegas police have arrested the man they think is responsible for the murder of Tupac Shakur. Since September 7, 1996, the night Shakur was shot 4 times while on the way to a nightclub, the entire entertainment industry and beyond have wondered who had the money and the anger needed to take out one of the most influential rappers of all time.
I'm trying to find my way in the world, I'm trying to be somebody instead of just make money off everybody.
Rising to fame during one of the most infamous West versus East Coast rap battles and facing plenty of prior accusations of his own, it isn't any surprise that Tupac had enemies. The question is, which one of them made the decision to do something about it, and why haven't they been caught? Enter Keefe D. Legally known as Duane Keith Davis, he was born in Compton, California in the 60s and eventually joined the South Side Compton Crips. As a child, he played football with Tupac's future close associate and Death.W.A. Records CEO Suge Knight and was friends with legendary N.W.A. rapper Eazy E. When Tupac was shot, everyone around him immediately pointed the finger at Orlando Anderson, Keefe D's nephew, who had gotten into it with friends of Tupac and Suge before. Anderson was even interviewed about the shooting, but only briefly, and he died in a non-related shooting 2 years after Tupac's death. Now, 27 years after the fateful murder, Keefe D has been arrested. That hot night in Las Vegas wasn't the only time that Tupac had been shot at. He had plenty of enemies on the East and West Coast, was associated with several known gang members, and grew up in East Harlem in the 70s, so he was no stranger to violence. That being said, the rapper himself had a very conscious philosophy and cared deeply about the issues plaguing black communities not only in New York but worldwide. This wasn't surprising based on his family's political activism. Both of his parents were active members of the Black Panther Party, and his grandmother was a member of the Black Liberation Army. While Tupac may have had close associations with gang members, he never came out as a member of one gang or another. Before going to jail in 1995, Tupac was almost killed in a robbery and shooting at Quad Studios in New York. James Rosemond, called Jimmy Henchman by most who knew him, offered Tupac $7,000 to record a verse for Little Sean, asking him to come by Quad Studios to do so. When Tupac and his company rolled up, 3 armed men were waiting for them in the lobby, and they robbed, beat, and eventually shot Pac as he struggled to fight them. This incident basically ruined the relationship between the notorious B.I.G., aka Biggie Smalls, and Tupac, who had become friends in 1993 after meeting in L.A. Since Biggie and Bad Boy Records CEO Sean Combs, aka Diddy, were both at Quad Studios the night of the shooting, Tupac accused them of setting him up. While both Biggie and Diddy denied setting up Tupac or knowing about the shooting, the damage was done, and the feud between Death.W.A. Records and Bad Boy Records only grew, fanning the flames of the coast-to-coast rap war that would take over the rest of the 90s. Though they may have denied it to the cops and the press, Diddy and Biggie didn't seem to be denying the rumors on their 1995 track Who Shot Ya?, which Tupac took as a direct attack at him and a taunt about the shooting. In return, he released Hit 'Em Up in 1996, which fans agree was a clear and open warning sign to Biggie, Diddy, and most of the East Coast rap scene. At this point, Tupac was signed to Death.W.A. Records and closely tied to Suge Knight, CEO of the label and a known affiliate of the Bloods gang in LA and across the West Coast. Tupac and Suge had struck a deal after Pac was charged, convicted of sexual abuse, and imprisoned in New York. While he was in jail, his mother, Afeni Shakur, was about to lose her house. So Tupac reached out to Suge Knight, who had $15,000 sent to Afeni. When his bond was set at more than $1 million pending his appeal, Tupac struck a deal with Knight to sign with Death.W.A. Records for 3 albums if Knight would post his bond. Suge must have known what kind of talent he had in front of him. Pac was already sensationally famous for 3 hugely successful albums and had won critical acclaim for several acting roles. He agreed to get Tupac out of jail and was rewarded by sharing in the success of All Eyes on Me, a double album that went 5 times multi-platinum and won Tupac multiple awards. Unfortunately, it would also be the last album Tupac would be alive to release. In September of 1996, Tupac traveled to Las Vegas to celebrate a friend's birthday, and he and Suge would be the only reliable witnesses to the shooting that led to his death. On the night of the 7th, September 1996, Tupac and Suge attended a fight between Bruce Seldon and Mike Tyson at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. After the fight, Pac, Suge and associates headed out through the lobby to go to a nightclub that Suge owned, but stopped once they spotted Orlando Anderson, Keefe D's nephew. Apparently, in July 1996, Anderson had tried to rob Trevon Lane, who worked for Death Row Records, and this incident provoked Tupac, Suge, and their entire entourage to jump Anderson when they spotted him after the fight. Once they finished with Anderson, Tupac and Suge headed to the nightclub in a black sedan. Around 11:15 p.m., Tupac and Suge had pulled up to his stoplight. While they were waiting for the light, a white Cadillac drove up on the passenger side, and someone in the car fired multiple shots at Tupac and Suge. Pac was hit 4 times, but Suge escaped with nothing but shrapnel injuries. Tupac was rushed to the hospital, but he eventually died of his injuries 6 days later. Immediately, the feud between West and East Coast rappers intensified. It was well known that Sean Diddy Combs used the South Side Crips, which Orlando Anderson and Keefe D both were, for protection. And his well-known feud with Tupac made him a perfect suspect in the public's eyes. An even more violent feud was established between the Crips and the Bloods on the West Coast, as Suge and other Bloods held Diddy and the Crips responsible for Tupac's murder. However, after Tupac's friends and associates, including Suge Knight, refused to cooperate with the police in accordance with street law, investigators had pretty much no solid leads other than the knowledge that Orlando Anderson and Tupac had fought hours before he was shot. After they made a half-hearted attempt to interrogate Anderson for the murder, investigators let him go, and he was killed 2 years later in an unrelated gang shooting. Then, for almost 15 years, no real progress was made on the case at all. Numerous books were written by reporters and crime analysts, and rumors continued to fly. It wasn't until 2011 that any new news was released about the case, and what came out had no legal consequences at the time. Now, after Keefe D's arrest, fans and true crime obsessors are re-listening to the evidence for themselves, and realizing it seems to break the case wide open. In 2011, Greg Cadling, a retired investigator who had worked on Biggie Smalls' murder case, released a tell-all book in which he interviewed Keefe D. According to D, not only did Orlando Anderson fire the shots to kill Tupac, Sean Diddy Combs had hired Keefe D, who was also in the car the night of the murder, to kill Tupac and or Suge Knight, whoever he could get a shot at. While this may seem a little far-fetched, Cadling has the recordings to back up his claims. In recorded conversations with Keefe D, D admits to Cadling that Diddy had spoken about the murder of Pac and Suge in front of a room full of Crips at a hotel in Anaheim, California, after a concert a few weeks before the murder. Then, the night before the murder, Diddy offered Keefe D $1 million to get rid of Tupac and Suge. So Keefe D and his associates made their way to Las Vegas. One of the men with Keefe D was driving a white Cadillac, the exact car that pulled up next to Tupac and Suge at the red light. After Orlando Anderson was assaulted by Tupac and Suge at the MGM Hotel, Keefe D's close friend, Eric Von Zip, allegedly gave Keefe D a pistol and told him now was the perfect time to take care of that thing. According to Keefe D's conversations with Cadling, he, his nephew Orlando, and 2 other men were in the white Cadillac when it drove up alongside Tupac and Suge. D insists to this day that Orlando is the one who pulled the trigger and killed Tupac. But in 2018, he did admit to the public that he was involved in the planning and execution of the murder. Despite all of this, apparently, prosecutors had no way to legally tie Keefe D or Orlando to the case in the 90s or 2000s, since no one was charged with anything. In terms of the money, it turns out Keefe D's friend, Eric Von Zip, was given the $1 million by Diddy after the murder, leaving Keefe D and Orlando with nothing. Fans suspect this may have prompted Keefe D to come clean, since Diddy never paid up. In July 2023, Keefe D's wife's house in Henderson, Nevada was raided by the Las Vegas police in search of evidence related to Tupac's murder. They must have found something because in September 2023, 27 years after the shocking shooting, Keefe D was officially arrested and taken into custody in connection with the murder of Tupac Shakur. Since then, fans and celebrities alike have been sounding off on social media about their thoughts around the case, Diddy's involvement, and how long it took the cops to bring someone in. 50 Cent has been especially vocal about his thoughts on Diddy refusing to pay Keefe D after the murder. And it's clear he's not the only one who thinks Diddy should face some sort of consequence for his actions. Until the trial concludes and the evidence is released to the public, we'll never really know whether Keefe D will legally go down in history as Tupac's killer. That being said, the man has spoken publicly many times about being involved in the shooting, and at the very least, encouraging his nephew Orlando Anderson to kill Tupac. Unless you can come up with a reason why Keefe D would lie about all of this and implicate himself in a decades-old murder, while also restarting beef with Diddy, it seems pretty clear what happened. What do you think? Was Keefe D involved? Did Diddy order Tupac's murder? If so, what should happen to him? Sound off in the comments and let us know what you think. And don't forget to stay tuned here for more true celebrity stories.